Obviously, the economic relationship is very important, but South Korea has to understand that it's not only China that can punish South Korea. It's not only the case that China is important to South Korea. South Korea is also important to China. And so the next South Korean president is going to need to know how to find leverage over China.
So, if you were to give score, what is President Moon's diplomatic score?
I'd say probably an A-. On the whole, I think very highly of Moon Jae-in's diplomacy, and I'll say a few reasons why. First of all, he was in a very, very difficult situation. He had Xi Jinping in China. And of course, Xi Jinping under Xi Jinping's leadership, China has become more and more assertive, more and more willing to punish countries that don't go along with what it wants. And then you had a right-wing nationalist government under Shinzo Abe in Japan. And then you had Trump in the United States. So you had three very strong-willed leaders, all of whom are very hardline and ideological in their own ways. And Moon Jae-in had this very delicate task of trying to keep everybody as, trying to maintain good relations with both the United States and China, despite the fact that there was growing friction between them. Handling really reactionary foreign policies coming from Shinzo Abe and Suga in Japan. And I think he did pretty well on all of those things. And so I give him a lot of credit for that.
So the U.S.-China conflict is turning into an economic war, or some people say a new Cold War. In your opinion, what do you think of the competition between the U.S. and China and the impact on neighboring countries, especially Korea?
I think that, unfortunately, rivalry between U.S. and China has become a really permanent feature, or if not permanent, a very long-lasting feature of international relations in the 21st century. I don't see the United States backing away from this perspective anytime soon. So, I think the U.S. has more and more anxiety about China, and I also see more and more toughness and assertiveness on the part of China. You saw it with the brief territorial conflict between China and India. You see China's growing assertiveness in the South China Sea, growing assertiveness on the Taiwan issue. All of these are areas of disagreement and competition between the United States and China. Obviously, it puts South Korea in a very difficult position. Part of the reason for this is because, South Korea has more in common with the United States politically, and it has a long-standing military alliance with the United States. But even while it shares political values with the United States, its largest trading partner is China. And, I think conflict with China that damages that can potentially really weaken or undermine economic prosperity in South Korea. So it's going to be a very delicate balancing act. And I think Japan may face the same thing. Japan's economy is not quite as closely linked to China's as South Korea's is, but China is still one of the most important trading partners for Japan. And like Korea, Japan has an alliance with the United States, and it shares some political values with the United States. So I think I think Japan and South Korea may be two countries that get caught in this competition the most. I think for countries like India, it's not hard to figure out what side they're on, right? So they have a little bit different perspective on this. Or for, say Australia, they know what side they're on. But I think for South Korea and Japan, it really can put them in a difficult and tricky situation. China, they really retaliate against countries that when they have disagreements with them. And South Korea tends not to be like that. But South Korean investment in China is very important to Chinese, it benefits South Korea too. But I think there are certain aspects of the economic relationship between South Korea and China that China cannot afford to lose. I also think that, China's goal is not to completely alienate South Korea. The problem is that China's diplomacy sometimes is not very subtle, and it ends up creating antagonism. You see that with this so-called wolf warrior diplomacy. But I think wolf warrior diplomacy is backfiring a little bit. And I think China is going to realize this eventually, that if you take a hardline approach with everybody, eventually you're not going to have many allies or friends left. So I think South Korea will learn to play on this aspect a little bit more. I think that's one of the things that it needs to do. It needs to do it in a way that it doesn't hurt or damage the economic relationship with China, but at the same time, it needs to make it clear that China can't push it around, that it's going to do what it thinks is necessary to do for its own national security and defense, and make it clear that it faces a strategic threat from North Korea. It feels it needs strong alliances to deal with that. And I think hopefully China will get the message and back down from this sort of punitive behavior that it's or the punitive approach that it's taken a lot of times in the last few years. Second, I think if you look at the way the world is developing, relations with China could be important, but relations with the rest of developing Asia are also going to be very important. South Korea already has some presence in India. I think relations with Vietnam are close in some ways, but there's also some issues. So I think, other parts of Southeast Asia, Indonesia, that are maybe not growing as fast, but still potentially important. South Korea should cultivate good relations with those parts of the Indo-Pacific as well, because there's a lot of opportunity there too. I think in terms of relations with Japan, South Korea should try to improve relations with Japan to the extent possible, but it should not concede on historical issues to Japan. I think that would be very unpopular, and I hope Japan's leadership will become more reasonable eventually. Finally, in terms of the alliance with the United States, I hope that the alliance will continue to remain strong. I think one of the things that I hope to see is that the alliance is no longer only about containing North Korea. There's a lot of other areas that the United States and South Korea can work together. Democracy promotion, climate change, supply chain security. All of these are issues that the United States and South Korea have a common interest in, and I think the alliance should move on to encompass those issues. So I think those will be the diplomatic priorities for the next South Korean president.